This is the OFN Today on the Our Lads Football Network. I'm Greg DePalma, and our main topics to discuss today include the opt-out deadline passing, the results are in, talk about the key players who will not be playing football in 2020. Politics and football continue to take center stage, unfortunately. UConn opts out of college football, and some in the media believe the entire sport should opt out as well. We have our first list of playoff/Super Bowl sleepers to unveil and much more in this edition of the OFN Today with Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post. Ryan, good to talk to you again.
What's up, Greg? How are you?
Doing all right. So it's nice to know that we have a good connection because not only, and this has nothing to do, or I mean, I don't know, I'm not in South Orange, New Jersey, but this has nothing to do with the weather or the weather impact from earlier this week. But I know you're having some technical issues, so hopefully we'll get through this show in one piece. The weather, though, not so good this past week for you, right?
No, I think it does have something to do with that. We didn't lose any power in Jersey when the storm actually hit on Tuesday and Wednesday, but I didn't lose any power. But a lot of parts of Jersey did. I know my son's daycare was closed. We've been lucky, and then all of a sudden, about 15 minutes ago, boom. So I'm assuming it's the fallout of some work being done somewhere by some electric company, triggering our grid to go out.
Yeah, right. It just when it seemed like you had passed the hard part.
Yeah. 2020.
Yeah, right.
Can I say 2020?
Yeah. All right, let's start with the DeAndre Baker story because we've been talking a lot about this. Obviously, you cover the Giants, the Jets, the NFL for the New York Post, and it appears that for now the law is winning in the case against DeAndre Baker.
Yeah, maybe not against Dunbar though. It's been a crazy story going back to May. So many twists, so many turns. But today, DeAndre Baker was charged with 4 counts of robbery with a firearm by the prosecutor's office. Going to move forward with that, so there'll be a grand jury. And they did not charge Quentin Dunbar, who for a while looked like he was the one who was probably going to get charged.
Yeah.
There was a search warrant from police that suggested a payoff of witnesses and accusers at his lawyer's office. That lawyer resigned and is now under investigation from the Florida bar. And it didn't look like that had anything to do with DeAndre Baker, and now they charge just Baker. So he's on the commissioner's exempt list, and it doesn't look like he'll be playing football maybe at all this season and maybe never again for the Giants.
Yeah, and to just say maybe is being nice.
I don't know that he'll never play in the NFL again.
Well, for 2020.
Oh, yeah, exactly. For 2020, I mean, you need to know the court date. Look, I don't know when the grand jury would be heard. I called over to the courts. They don't have any date set on the books. With the coronavirus, all this stuff gets pushed back. You're probably looking at, September or October, and then even if they did dismiss the charges, he hasn't practiced at all. It's very, very unlikely he plays in 2020, and almost as unlikely he ever plays for the Giants again. My guess is if he plays again, he'll be suiting up for somebody else.
I'm sure he would like the opportunity to opt out, but he can't take advantage of that, I'm sure.
No, but then he'd be getting paid less anyway.
Yeah.
Remember, he's still getting his salary right now.
Exactly. And speaking of opt-outs, we talked a lot about it last week, and at the time, we mentioned, well, yeah, Donta Hightower, I think was the biggest name. There was Michael Pierce and a few others, but we weren't sure if there was going to be the blockbuster name, the really big superstar. And lo and behold, and I think this has a lot to do. See, there's this like cloud of negativity that permeates around Jet fans, and it's like a cloud. And anytime that there's an opportunity for something negative to happen, like that negativity just sorts. It's like a weather pattern, and it just sees the cloud over New Jersey, New York, and it goes, well, I'm going to head over there. And CJ Mosley, not only does he opt out, but at this point in time, he's got to be the biggest name player to opt out.
Yeah, I would say he's probably the biggest star. Him and Hightower are probably the biggest stars. Nate Solder's the highest paid guy from the Giants. But that second tier, or maybe it's the third tier star, the guy who's no All Pros opted out. Some guys who've made a Pro Bowl or two opted out. Jawan James, a starting tackle for the Broncos, opted out. Starting caliber players all across the league opted out. It wasn't just bottom of the roster guys, but there were no all pros either. So it was that second or third tier guys. And yeah, Mosley's the big one for sure.
Yeah, matter of fact, you had mentioned how the likelihood of the bigger athletes, the defensive tackles, because we had talked about Pierce and Star Latulele and so forth. And sure enough, there was a big number of impact defensive tackles.
I think about half the guys were were linemen, offensive or defensive linemen. About half of the 69 guys, I think it was, about half of them played in the trenches. And it's not a surprise because their weight is a risk factor, and all the hand-to-hand contact they do is a risk factor. So it's not a surprise to see that's where the teams are most often hit.
Yeah, besides the ones that we've already talked about the last couple of weeks, I mean, Billings from Cleveland, Atkins from Detroit, or a couple of the defensive tackles. Marcus Gilbert, even though he hasn't really been available for Arizona much, so I'm not sure how much they miss him. But look, Arizona needs all the offensive line help they can get. So, and the James leaving Denver, as you mentioned, is a blow because they still have a young quarterback there in Drew Lock.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Anytime you lose one, look, here's what we know about the NFL. There aren't enough good tackles on a good year. Before injuries happen, before opt-outs happen, there are not enough good offensive tackles in the NFL as it is. Bad players have jobs as tackles in the NFL. And now you're opting out and pushing everybody up the depth chart. Quarterbacks, I wouldn't, if I was a quarterback, I'd be a little, I'd speed up my time. I'd get the ball out maybe a half second quicker if I could.
Speaking of opt-outs, taking a look at an article, Mike Florio at Pro Football Talk on Mark Murphy, who, in quotes, we absolutely wanted player opt-out rights. And I thought this was interesting to talk about because basically the article was about Mark Murphy. Matter of fact, he said, I think at the end here, he goes, maybe a little bit more opt-outs than I would have thought. But then Florio basically follows it up with, there undoubtedly would be more if there was more time to decide whether to opt out. And the article really was about Florio's stance. He doesn't like the fact that players had to have a date to decide to opt out or not. And obviously you opt out before the deadline. You still, and I want you to obviously fill in the blanks here with the contractual situation and the differences between those players that have opted out before the deadline and any players who decide to opt out after.
So if you opt out after, they have to have a reason. It has to be a documented new medical condition for you or for your family. You can't voluntarily opt out now at this point. There were two different opt-outs prior to Thursday's deadline. You could voluntarily opt out, as we saw some guys do. I'll use the Giants as an example, as I often do. Cornerback Sam Beal voluntarily opted out, and then so he gets a $150,000 cash advance towards his salary. And then Nate Solder is a high-risk opt-out, a cancer survivor with a son who's a cancer patient and a newborn at home. He gets a $350,000 advance. Their contract tolls, so it extends a year, basically goes on freeze. Now to opt out, you have to have a documented new condition. You can't just voluntarily opt out after the deadline. I kind of agree. With Florio, I think players, I don't love the idea that there had to be a deadline for them to opt out. If it had to be a deadline, I think it didn't have to be this soon. I know Devin McCourty, who I have ultimate respect for, known him for a decade, felt like it was a rushed deadline, like they agreed to a week and all of a sudden it became 2 days. And that's not the spirit of negotiating. I don't see why it couldn't have been a week before the regular season started or right around the cut down to 53 guys. Why it couldn't have been then, I don't see why they had to rush it. Maybe in the regular season you don't want guys opting out, but for the duration of training camp, I definitely think guys could have had the option. I would agree with
Well,
that. And then
but from the
the,
business point of view, I mean, and I'm only guessing, but I would theorize that the reason that they wanted the deadline a month before the season begins is to give them enough time that if, let's say, CJ Mosley decides to opt out, they've got a full month to figure out, hey, do I, and this is something we can get into, do I then cut Brian Winters to free up more cash space so I can sign another player?
yeah, but you know what? If CJ Mosley, knock on wood, tore his ACL with a week
Oh,
left,
sure.
you don't get that time to plan.
That's
So,
true.
and NFL teams are used to adjusting on the fly. I think they should have to adjust on the fly here. So that would be my thing. I have no problem with a start of the regular season deadline, but I didn't like how rushed it
Well,
felt from a
so what are
player.
the contract differences then?
So basically, if they start to play that much, will count to the salary cap. So you get paid every 17 week, every one, in 17 installments in the NFL. So if you start playing, you that much of your salary will count to the salary cap. Just like right now, everything that you get paid in the year will count to your salary cap. So like right now, I'll use Nate Solder as an example. He had his salary doesn't count towards the salary cap. His signing bonus doesn't count towards the salary cap. Both of those get pushed into 2021. And then his roster bonus counts because his roster bonus was paid to him in March. So that counts because that was actually paid in 2020. So his salary cap hit went from $19.5 million to $3 million, which was his roster bonus. Everything else gets pushed back. So the Giants free up about $16 million in salary cap. If he played 1 or 2 weeks, then divide that salary of what I forget what his salary actually was, maybe $13 million. Divide that by 17, and those are his game checks. However many weeks he played, that would have counted towards the salary.
Does that also mean that his contract, like let's say he has a 3-year contract, he still has a 3-year contract?
Correct. He had 2 years remaining on his contract. It was due to expire after the 2021 season. He will now be under contract through 2022. So
Okay.
everything so his bonus and his salary for 2020 become his bonus and his salary for 2021, and 2021 becomes 2022.
All right, and then flip it around. Let's say a player decides after a few weeks, I'm not going to do this. What happens to his contract?
Can't do that. You have to have a documented, you would have to have, a new condition for you or a new condition for your family. You can't just decide in 2 weeks to opt out.
So is that so does that mean that anybody that does decide to opt out, it's sort of like during a regular season situation, a regular year situation, it's like somebody just walking off the playing field and saying, I'm not playing this year?
Good question. I'm not sure what happens when somebody walks off the playing field.
If he just says, I'm opting out, so I'm leaving and I don't care that I'm not going to get paid, I'm just opting out, but the contract has to stay the same and all of that, right? There's that penalty there for that player.
Yes, correct. He would get, yes, from a cap standpoint, his salaries would count for the amount of time that he's played.
Okay. All right. So we will see, and it's quite possible we'll get one of these situations, but I mean, it's a tough one, and it's one where you would have to believe that the situation will more than likely be one, I would think, that the NFL would approve in some way. I'd be surprised if you get one where it's, because you don't want to get into a bad PR thing either. That wouldn't be good.
Cespedes?
Yeah, you don't want. Yeah, that's.
If an NFL team is calling looking for their player on game day, I mean, look, it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
It's certainly possible. Like you said, if it happens to the Mets, it'll probably happen to the Jets. So it's certainly possible that somebody somewhere will, want to opt out without the documentation needed. It's certainly possible.
Okay, now the NFL launched a NFL Votes Initiative this week. So they're going to partner with three nonprofit, nonpartisan organizations. Tell me a little bit about what is the reason for this, and is there a winning, like, is there a winning, like, does the NFL get like a win here, and and who else wins by something like this?
Well, I'm curious. What did you make of it? What did you make what did you make of it, Greg? Did you think anything of it?
I thought it was okay. You've got the NFL that is, I look at it as a good thing, because after what happened with Deshaun Jackson, it's like, okay, maybe there are players in our league, which there are, that need to be educated about politics, about their own business, and this is just another way for them to continue that education process. I look at it that way. I don't know if I look at it as that it favors like a particular party or not, unless I'm missing something. But I look at it as
No,
education.
yeah. Look, I thought it was a good thing. Look, these leagues, the day of like separating church and state, I think for these leagues is probably over at this point. I think that's what this offseason has shown us. The players are active. They want their employer, the league, to be active. So without necessarily taking a party stance, they are now going to educate players on voting and voting issues, and maybe that encourages fans of the league who don't vote to get involved with voting issues. The conspiracist in me, I've had several people bring this up.
Okay.
They wonder about this, and I don't know. I don't. This is just me talking.
Okay.
And you talk this out. I don't know if this is true. I don't know that anybody will know if it's true, because the NFL would be foolish to admit it. Even wink, wink, nod, nod. But I've had some conspiracy theorists in my phone send me messages wondering if this is a Donald Trump hammers us as often as possible over Colin Kaepernick and the national anthem and stuff. Is it possible that this voting thing is a message back to him that the NFL supports voting, where Trump obviously is on a little bit of a crusade against voter corruption and stuff like that. I'm not a political person. I don't know a whole lot about how politics work, and what I don't try not to pay attention to left and right, but I do know this. I do know that there seems, if the NFL's hot button issue is the national anthem and standing and Kaepernick, the hot button issue for Trump would certainly be voting and voter fraud and things like the voter education. So it certainly seemed like a timely response.
But you're looking at it more as a PR move, though. Not like, okay, that means that X amount of NFL players are now going to vote for Donald Trump.
Well, no, I think no. I mean, no. Yeah, I don't know. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
But it's like a PR move, is what you're saying. That Trump,
Yeah,
it might be that this is a timely situation because Trump is now makes him look good.
Yeah, I just think it was a interesting. I just
Okay.
think it was an interesting message that the NFL sent in terms of, hey, let's we're not going to be bullied around here by President Trump. Let's make sure that all our players understand voting's a big thing, and we're not, we're going to make sure that they all know that we're not afraid of that.
Okay.
So
All right.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was you don't see that very often, and I can remember going around locker rooms and asking players like, oh, during election years, like, oh, are you going to vote? And players are private about it, but I think we know, based on, what states vote which way and what demographics vote which way. I think the NFL, a certain section of NFL players have obviously made it very clear how they feel about President Trump. I can remember Olivier Vernon when he was on the Giants saying Trump is not my president.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't think he's the only one in the NFL who feels that way. So I thought it was certainly an interesting thing that so many NFL players are outspoken against the president, and the NFL is encouraging them to vote. I thought if you want to put two and two together and be a conspiracy theorist, I thought there was a lot there for you to do that.
All right. Now, before we get onto our sleepers, and we will talk college football from time to time, because it definitely
I love
correlates
it.
to the NFL, and that it
I love
what's that?
I love college
Yeah, I
football.
mean, it's look, we're going to start talking a lot of college football on this network soon. I just have held back with any college football talk because even until I probably need another week or two before I really, really, truly believe that they're going to start a season, even though it does look like it's going to happen.
I'll tell you, Greg, I really think you're not going to have an NCAA football season.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, if anything, I'm hoping that you can take a negative and turn it into a positive, and maybe within a year or two, we're actually going to have ourselves what we've been hoping to have for college football for years, and that's a playoff system.
I don't think you're going to have an NCAA football season. I think you might have an SEC football season. You might have a Big 12.
Oh, Power 5 football season.
No, I don't think you'll have a Big 10 season. I don't think you'll have a Pac-12 season. I think you're going to see a very geographical conference-based split. I think you could very well see the SEC say we're going to play a round-robin 13-game only season, and our winner is the national champion because we're the best. And just declare themselves the national champion and try to play their own season, while the Big 10 probably the conference with the strongest educational academic ties sits it out. That would not surprise me in the least.
Well, none of that would surprise me after what they did in March, and I'm never going to be surprised again in any situation regarding the government taking away my sports.
That was unanimous NCAA.
Oh, sure, but that's, it's
this I think will be conference. I think this will be very conference split.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be surprised if anything in any way, whoever's to blame, if it happens. I would have the way things are going, though. I don't know. I mean, I need to see continued negative numbers over the next week or two for that to happen. I don't know if that's going to continue or not. We'll see. I know the Rutgers situation. Look, see, the Rutgers situation is interesting because, yeah, they had an outbreak of players. But, look, I mean, the way I'm looking at it is, okay, I'd rather have them have their outbreak of 25 players now, or whatever the number is, if they added on some other coaches and stuff, because once they're back and healthy in the next couple of weeks, then hopefully that'll be it for them, and we won't have to worry about them during the season. But it definitely is a warning sign, especially for a university like Rutgers.
So here's what I would say. A couple of things. One, it was very jarring to me on the same day the Big Ten released a new 2020 football schedule.
Yeah.
On the same day UConn canceled 2020 football.
Yes.
So if that wasn't 2020 in a nutshell, Greg, I don't know what.
Yeah.
Like, this is how little unanimity we can come to right now is one school is canceling on the day another school's charging forward. So, like, that was crazy to me. That shows how different things are. UConn and Rutgers are whatever they are, 150 miles away or whatever, and one school has to charge forward while the other school shuts down. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I know all the Northeast Division I AA, the Ivies bumped, the Patriot Leagues bumped.
Ryan, if Rutgers wasn't in the Big Ten and they were an independent, they would have shut down already.
Correct. So I totally agree. So it's crazy to me. Rutgers is one of the leaders in the nation. Rutgers Medical School is one of the leaders in the nation in developing testing. So on one hand, you have Rutgers academics leading the charge in the fight against coronavirus, and the other end you have Rutgers football with the biggest outbreak in sports right now, bigger than the Marlins. Obviously, a football team has bigger numbers, but pure numbers, the biggest outbreak in sports. I just don't know. We got to put this in context. NJ.com, it's my former employer. They're the ones who reported they had 28 players. My sources have told me that it's not necessarily all because of a party, as the governor and the New Jersey health officials say it all stems from a party. I don't know that that's necessarily true. That's not how I've heard things at Rutgers. There was a party, but it may not be all 28 people is from that. But my point being, NJ.com, my former employer, so I'm a little biased here. They reported 28 people. That's a tremendous inside reporting job. I don't know, Greg. I'm very suspicious that other schools don't have that similar number. Knowing Greg Schiano's a taskmaster, knowing the respect players have for him, no, he's not asleep at the wheel here. And if his program has 28, I wonder what other programs have 28 or more that we just don't know because the reporters haven't had that kind of inside access that NJ.com has at Rutgers. So I would not be surprised if there are other schools sleeping on 28, 30 tests. And if that's the case, this is going nowhere.
Well, here's the thing that is in my, and whether or not, look, college football is its own entity, and then there are other businesses and so forth. I don't like how politics gets into this. Every business, I would hope would have a little bit more power, and we would trust that they would do the right thing. So college football, you would hope that they would do the right thing. And when I look at, see, the thing is I get a kick out of certain politicians who talk about, well, look at the stats, look at the stats. Well, yeah, you say look at the stats, but then I don't know what stats you're looking at, because I was looking at the NJ.gov stats, and I think that the issue has got to be, okay, if you're afraid of players that pick up the virus, and you're afraid that they're going to pick up the virus and they're going to go home and they're going to affect their older parents or grandparents, I'm okay with that. But by no means the silliness of this affecting the player themselves, where they could die, is nonsense. If you look at the NJ.gov stats, 597 deaths in New Jersey between the ages of 30 and 49, 55 between the ages of 18 and 29. Now, if you look at that, 55 between the ages of 18 and 29, that's the college students. That is 0.4%. And that is a number that, I'm sorry, it just tells you that you can't be afraid of a college kid dying from this virus. But again, if you're worried about them taking it home, affecting the parents and grandparents, then I will have that conversation with you.
I'll just say this. Remember, and it's a different sport, but the Red Sox pitcher Eduardo Rodriguez out for the season with a heart ailment believed to be, stemming from his battle with COVID-19. People are saying he could have long-term long-term cardiac effects, long-term. He was diagnosed with myocarditis, inflammation of the heart. He's in his mid to late 20s. So, and he's a paid athlete, not a college athlete. And
but again, that's one athlete.
You say 0.4% or 0.04% or whatever, those are numbers. But when you put a real, even if it's 0.00001%, but as soon as that number has a face and that face pitches for the Red Sox, and then that guy tells his heartbreaking story,
I agree. And that's why we deal with that's where I have that conversation, which I totally agree with you on. That I think that it's all about optics, and that's not good. It's not good, especially when you're talking about college kids.
It just takes one. I really believe that. I thought you can give me some minuscule percentage, but I think I've said this on here before. I know I've said it other places. It's just, to me, it reminds me so much of heat fatigue, of cardiac diseases related to heat. When we saw kids dying of heat stroke on football fields or concussions, it's all percentages until it's somebody's real person story, and then people really start to listen. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to have a face of this sooner or later, whether it's college football or the NFL or both. We'll have a face to it, and then I think that's when changes will actually be made.
Well, here's the other thing, and this is real important, and that is that I think everybody agrees that's following this, that the chances are more than likely that this is something that, even though it eventually will, the numbers will go down in 6 months or 8 months, it chances are it's going to stay around for a while. maybe for a couple more years while the percentages go down. Let's just say there's no vaccine. That then you get into the, okay, well, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to
Yeah.
shut everything down for 2 or 3 years? You can't do that.
Some people would say
I
yes
know
to
they
that
would.
question.
And then
Yeah.
we'll wind up being Argentina, economy wise. And that's that's a bigger story, a bigger debate for sports. But it's one of the things that, see, that's why I think that we're going to have a much. I think our debate will change in November anyway.
Yeah, like I said, politics. You will not meet a less political person than me, and I'm not. That's not something to brag
That's
about.
okay.
Like
I envy you.
be more educated on major issues than I
Hi.
am.
My father,
I,
who's retired, is I mean, he knows not to talk to me about politics because he used to talk to me about it, and it's like he would do all the talking, and I would just keep my mouth closed because I'm not getting. And then I would say, and then every once in a while, I say to him, you're retired. Why do you watch politics 3 or 4 hours
yeah.
a day? You have no job. You got your Social Security. Okay, maybe it could be affected, but it really, come on. I mean, it's like, why would you get into that realm? It's just an ugly, ugly thing.
There's a reason I'm a sports writer and not a news
That's
writer.
right. And God bless you for that. All right, let's talk about sleepers now. And by the way, we will have our NFL sleepers updated list, our final list, as well as our picks and all that other stuff when we get to the last week of the season of the off season. And let's throw in some sleepers though for now, just in case you are thinking about dabbling into your sports book or Vegas. We both agree on a couple of teams. And sleepers for me are, and now I'm going to clarify them on this show this particular week, as 30-1 odds to win the Super Bowl or higher. And by the way, that noise is happening again, which happened the last time you cut off. So hopefully it's not related. Are you still there, Ryan? Oh, you see, Ryan's gone. All right. Well, look, if Ryan lost his power and he's not coming back, and I'm going to give him a couple of seconds to call back, then we did a pretty good show, and we'll hold off our sleepers to next week. And I know I wanted to get into those Madden rankings too, so maybe we'll do that one of these weeks. But and by the way, this whole thing about what we just talked about, the politics of football and everything, we're not going to talk about that much. And there's going to be a time here in the next couple of weeks where it's going to be over, where there's not going to be any reason to talk about politics or, I hope, the virus. You want to talk about the virus? Go on another show. Go on a political show. But I'm not going to do that on this show. On this show, it's going to be about football. But we have to talk about it now because it's still the offseason. We have no preseason games. We have no tape from training camp. So we're going to talk about what's newsworthy, and we're going to get out of the way. So people know that we talked about it. We have our opinions, and then that's it. And then we move on. So next week, sleepers. And then we'll throw in some other related, football-related predictions, analysis kind of stuff starting next week. And then that's it. And then we'll get all the other stuff out of the way because just so you know, if you haven't already, and I'm assuming you have, we have our other shows. We have the OFN NFL preview show with Mark Lawrence. So we've already previewed 5 of the 8 conferences on that show. So we have 3 more to go. So those are all available on demand. We talk about the odds to win the Super Bowl, the division odds. We give our analysis on why we think, certain teams might be good picks to win their division as sleepers, things of that nature, or even a team that's even money to win a division, like the Saints might be a pretty good pick at even money, even though the Bucs are also even money. But we both kind of liked New Orleans in that situation. And then once I get a little bit of a better feel about college football, we're going to start incorporating college football into our programming here on the Ourlads Football Network. But just going to give it as much time as possible before I start feeling a little bit more confident. Ryan, less confident than I am that we're going to get a college football season or something resembling a college football season where most of the teams are going to play. Most of the teams are going to play 10-game schedules. Maybe they'll have to cancel a game here or a game there. But I'm still on that other side of the fence that Ryan is. I'm still confident today. That could change by our show next week, but I'm confident today that we're going to have a season like that. And next week, we have a couple of interviews already scheduled on this show. And I believe Ryan is going to be a part of those interviews. We're going to speak with Ryan Talbot, who covers the Buffalo Bills. I believe that's next Wednesday. And Evan Lazar, who covers the New England Patriots. We're going to talk to him, I believe, on Monday. So New England and Buffalo next week. We've already got that lined up. And just those are the ones I know for sure. But these types of interviews are going to continue as we lead up until the start of the regular season. And like I said, I promise college football, we'll get into college football real soon. Hopefully in 2 weeks. I mean, that's my goal, is at least in the next 2 weeks, maybe one more week. And then after that, we'll start talking college football here on the Our Lads Football Network. So thanks to Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post. Check out his article, just out, I believe, or it's going to be out later today, on DeAndre Baker, his arrest, and so forth. And next week, again, interviews, more on their sleepers on this particular show with Ryan Dunleavy, and much more on the Our Lads Football Network.